we'll just dive right in because we are speaking to an authenticity expert. Lucy is a certified executive coach. She is a consultant and she is a podcast host as well.
Which is how we found her.
Indeed.
So she reached out to me and said, I'd love to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, being authentic about it. I know it's your company. And so I told her about Siarza. I told her about the Asian Business Collaborative. And we just hit it off. She was really great. And she was also very forgiving for the fact that, like, I had to do the podcast in the middle of McDonald's just because it has reliable Wi-Fi. Swear to God.
Which it's so funny when she and I were chatting, she was telling me about that. And I was like, then you got the full authentic Kristelle experience because she's going to be in the middle of life. She's going to make like whatever she needs to do. She's going to make it happen with whatever's going on in life. I was like, that is on brand. You got a very authentic interview from Kristelle then.
Yeah, and so what I didn't know is that she had done 20 years in the pharma industry, doing a lot of the cross-functional operations stuff. So she talks a lot about corporate life, or she talks about a lot of those parallels now being a new business owner, or being a business owner, a seasoned business owner for herself, which is great. The show is just, it's running for a very, very long time. Lots of viewers, lots of followers, etc. She mentions here that she's known for her team building, leveraging the authenticity in her team building, and creating the high impact teams, which every organization is very, very yearning for. She's a blast. She's really sweet.
She is. She's super sweet. And she, like, from all of those years in corporate America, really got hands-on first-person experience of the results, kind of the cookie cutter, everybody fit in the same mold type of work environment. And then one where people are allowed to be their authentic selves and the major benefits that come from that. Obviously for the person, because it feels good to be you, right? But the business benefits that go along with having an authentic workforce as well.
I think the part that was really fun about being on her show is that a lot of the things that I mentioned, which are my podcast with her, will be aired later this summer. She was taken back by the amount of authenticity that I kind of exuded, and not just for myself, but I talked about, the team and the team dynamic and who we are, etc. And she was surprised by it. And I think that's what surprised me, is that she was surprised by it. And when she had there's a part of the show where we ask her, like, do you have a certain story to share? I'll let her kind of say, like, what she said, but I believe her when she says that sometimes people might not be as authentic as it seems, or companies say that they are, but they're really not.
Yeah.
So I think that was really cool that she kind of said to us, like, no, this is the real deal. Like, you should really be the real deal, and this is really cool that you are. So I'm really excited to introduce to you all Lucy Rowell, the certified executive coach. I hope that you enjoy her podcast, which she'll mention at the end of the episode. But don't forget to subscribe to ours on your favorite podcast channel, on YouTube, and at siarza.com. Please meet Lucy Rowell. Lucy, thank you so much for being on the show. Is it a little surreal being the guest this time rather than the host of the
Yes, absolutely. So bear with me. It might just be a little bit of an adjustment as we get going.
If you start throwing questions our way, too, as you're used to being your own podcast host, that's totally fine as well. We'll mix it up.
Tell me, and thank you for being on our show. I'm very curious, impactful authenticity. One of the things that I was taken back in a great way, like, I was so overcome with excitement as we were talking. You asked a very bold question, which is the common question that you ask every guest, like, how do you explain authenticity? How do you define authenticity? What is impactful authenticity? Can you go into that in your own life, in your own way, especially as a podcast host and as a business owner yourself?
Yeah. So good question. Thanks for asking that to kick things off. So I think for me, authenticity in its kind of simplest form, or how I like to think about it, is that, what you say and what you're thinking actually kind of mirror action. So I think often we're thinking about things, but actually then the action that comes around that doesn't actually match. Those things actually don't kind of mirror each other. So, it could just be really simple things in life where you might be thinking, right, I really want to have a piece of chocolate. that's going to make me happy. That's what I need right now.
Like you're talking about my whole life.
Yeah. Late in the afternoon as we're recording this for me. But then, you know, you just go, someone says, oh, here's a chocolate bar. And you go, no, I'm not going to do that. That, you know, that's not what I'm going to have. That's not, no, simple answer. Now, what I find interesting with this one, and I use this kind of example because it's something where you've probably actually got a couple of things playing against each other. So authenticity typically will have, you know, you'll have a couple of things in your mind that you're working towards. So one, for example, may be, I have a value that, you know, again, what I'm thinking, I want to action. I want to be true to myself. But I might have another one, which is like, you know, I want to have a healthy body. I want to, you know, give myself good things. Now, in that example I just gave with the chocolate, you've kind of got two conflicting things. I want to be healthy and fit. That's part of who I am. That's what I'm about. But I also want to kind of go with my gut and do things that, you know, make sense and make me happy at that time. So I think this is sort of like the interesting play a lot of the time with authenticity, is that even in just those examples with two values that you might hold, you've already got a conflict and you have to figure out which one you're going to have to prioritize. So I think when we take this kind of to things like business, it gets really, really interesting, because typically in companies or as owners of companies, you've probably got, you know, 3, 4, 5 values that you're maybe thinking about, and you're continuously having to make trade-offs. And it's not to say that one answer or another is not more or less authentic. It's probably just kind of how you're feeling at that point on that specific day that leads you to say one thing or do something versus something else. So I think in my own life, I think what I saw through sort of my career was that I was thinking and feeling many things I wasn't acting on. And not that I, you know, did bad in life and my career by following those rules. I think it's very often we find that there are, you know, social norms that kind of get put on us, and thoughts about what a business owner is and what a career person looks like in X, Y, and Z position. And you kind of sort of fall into that. And it took me probably a fairly long time, in a sense. It was probably maybe 10 years before I started realizing, actually, I don't want to be playing this game anymore. I just want to show up as I want to show up. And hopefully people like that. Hopefully people get that. But if not, then I'll have to figure out what to do. So I could talk about this for ages, but I'll stop there, and happy to kind of shed more light on any of that if you want.
I think that's a really interesting analysis, and not to cut you off, but is that the reason why the show became impactful? I mean, it seems like the show was named that, but like, was there like a catalytic moment in your life that kind of made you prompt that? Or was there like a certain scenario or story where you said, you know, this is the approach that I want to take. This is the conundrum that I'm in, that put you in that dilemma of impactful and authenticity being separate.
Yeah. So I guess there's two stories in a sense. So there was one that I think was my own story to kind of recognizing my own impactful authenticity. And that was just after being in a huge corporate organization for many, many years. And yeah, following what I believed was, you know, what was needed to be successful. And as I said, I was very successful in that sphere. I just got a little bit fed up. And I also, I think, started to recognize that you could be a better role model by actually just being who you are, rather than just following what everybody else was doing and just trying to kind of blend with the crowd. And I think what's kind of interesting for me around authenticity is there are certain parts, I believe, kind of in your life where you are more authentic just naturally. And I think often as you start new jobs is an area where typically people try to blend in. You want to make friends, you want to like seem like you like fit into the new job or the new team or whatever that would be. And so you kind of maybe soften some of your edges, or you just kind of turn up maybe a little bit differently. So that was certainly one piece where I kind of recognized no one around me really reflected how I felt true leadership should be. And I think being established enough, having taken some time to think, I'm feeling brave enough to just go and give this a shot in a slightly different way. So that was the first part. And then the second bit, in terms of things like setting up the podcast, like setting up my own company, that was all actually around an opportunity to take voluntary redundancy after being 20 years in corporate. And I'd thought about setting up the podcast a few years before. I'd woken up in the middle of the night thinking, you know, I felt just so inspired by what could happen if people actually showed up authentically more in work. And I just thought, oh, as often is the case, there's all those assumptions of like, I don't have enough time. How do I even start thinking about this? How do I put a podcast together? What do I need? Like, and I just kept kind of pushing it to the side, pushing it to the side. And then when I got this opportunity to think about redundancy, the first thing I actually made the decision about, regardless of whether do I stay in that company, do I find another job, what do I do, was I'm going to set up this podcast. It's been on my mind for a couple of years. You know what? It would be great to just have some amazing conversations with really brilliant leaders in lots and lots of different organizations and companies about their own journeys, about what they've done, how they kind of navigated some of these tricky parts. And everyone's story is so different and everyone's story is really interesting. So that was the sort of impetus, I guess, to kind of set me off onto something slightly different. And how we had our lovely conversation, Kristelle, when you came on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're talking with these leaders, these company owners about a more authentic culture around, or even allowing their employees to be more authentic, do they get freaked out a little bit? Does that scare them? Does the idea of an authentic employee showing up freak leaders out?
I would say on the whole, yes. And I think on the ones where it doesn't, I think actually when it comes into practice, it does.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because there's, I think, a lot of confusion around sort of what does it mean? And again, everyone's got their own kind of interpretation of it, and that's completely fine. I don't think there's a problem with having slightly different thoughts on what it kind of means. But I think there's a lot of concern about, people sort of kind of turning up and being really inappropriate in a work kind of environment.
Mm-hmm. Like all of our authentic selves are just secret heathens and they're just about to come out.
Yeah, it's I think I think a lot of concern about that. I think the other thing that I hear a lot of concern about is that, and this isn't just around authenticity, but just general diversity in the workplace, is that, it's going to really complicate things because we're used to doing things in a certain way. And I'll take a very simple example, like communication. Right. Well, we're used to just doing our communication over email. Well, not everybody's preferred format of absorbing information is written. But, suddenly, if you start asking people, well, what is it you want? Like, how can we help you get the best out of you? And if people are throwing like all these different ideas, then it's like, oh my gosh, right. It was really simple before. Now I've got to think about how to try and make sure that everyone, and I like to think about authenticity in the workplace a lot of the time, it's just allowing people to show up to do their best work. And so it's one of those things where it will create a little bit of additional, I hate the word of burden, but that's often what people kind of use back to us to get it in place. But then once the systems are there, actually, they run and it's fine. It's just people kind of getting used to it. And I think a lot of the time, business owners, leaders have got to get comfortable with just talking and asking and listening. sitting and listening. What is it that people want? What is it that people need? And how can I, as a leader and business owner, help my team to do that? Because I think that's why I think about this impactful part. Because if you take it as I'm trying to help people do their best work, and their best work, I want to see it in my team, in my company, then there is a business benefit and impact to that, as well as to the impact to the team and to the individuals and hopefully to society more broadly.
And is getting employees best work through their authentic work styles or authentic humanness the main benefit? Is it the only benefit? Thinking about the burden and what I'm hearing is discomfort that's going to come with this kind of change and the additional communication and all of that. What's the sell to a business owner to do this? What's the big benefit to make it all worth it?
What we've typically seen, I think one of the first things is actually employee retention. And I think often companies underestimate how much time and effort it takes to recruit somebody, and especially a really good person. So if you've got someone in your team who's great, you do actually want to do what you can to keep them, because the time and costs involved is high. I think secondly is that actually a lot of companies that, again, I'll say a lot, this isn't every single one, but on the whole, most companies want to be creative and innovative and be doing things that are, new, cutting edge, a little bit different, no matter what it is, whatever the industry, you can kind of apply that more kind of fairly broadly. And to do that, then you have to let everyone have a perspective and view and have everyone be able to bring those ideas and to push each other to come and think about things that are not just what the team leader thinks, what the business owner thinks. So typically what we've seen is there's a little bit of friction at the start, but you keep employee engagement high. Secondly, you actually create more creative, innovative ideas, processes, systems, however that may be, which in the long run then has a massive impact on just business performance generally. So there's usually a little bit of a wobbly start at the beginning. Actually, let's be honest, like all these things are going to be a little bit wobbly at the beginning. But once it's kind of embraced, then actually the impact to business is significant.
Sure, most definitely.
And you should think about it.
Yeah. I can't believe our time is about to end, and I want to give you at least another good 5 minutes, but I know I have a funny feeling this answer is going to be a little bit longer. So you've interviewed hundreds of C-level executives. You have some phenomenal stories that I'm sure that you've heard about impactful authenticity. Can you name a couple that you said to yourself, this particular story stands out to me because it truly is that definition of impactful authenticity? Or was there a person or a personality that you've talked to that's like, I really think that they are the definition of the show?
Oh, such a good question. Well, I think actually what I'll start off with saying is I think what's interesting about the show is this might sound really bad. I don't actually always believe all the guests, because most people come on the show and say we're absolutely authentic. And I don't actually believe there's anybody on this earth who is completely authentic all of the time. I just don't think it exists. So I think actually it's, people do have to get comfortable with openly being able to say, sometimes I'm not really that authentic. Sometimes, I have to kind of show up in a certain way and I might be feeling like absolute crap, but no, I have to put a smile on my face. I have to go out there and deliver something. And it's not me. And that's just kind of the way life is. Like, we know that is kind of how our life works. I think what I would say is that the things that I think have shone through on the show, which I know I've kind of taken away myself, is one, this act of curiosity. I think the people who seem to have been really successful are the ones who are curious. They're curious to understand about themselves. They take on quite a lot of like reflective practices, etc., to really kind of self-analyze themselves, where they're doing great, where there could be improvement, how they're thinking about things. And because of that, they gain this kind of creative curiosity about others, about people in their team, about trying to understand how people work, how you can kind of, get the biggest impact out of individuals, etc. So I think curiosity has been one huge thing that's flown through, curiosity and reflection. And the second thing I would say, I think that's, again, pretty consistently kind of shone through is this idea around vulnerability. And, again, how do you yourself be vulnerable and create the spaces for others to be vulnerable? And that's, again, one thing I think, Kristelle, that came kind of nicely through some of the conversation that we had when you were on the show, is that part about how you create these very safe spaces for people in your organization to be vulnerable, to kind of show up and share who they are. So I think that's another piece that I think if at the moment you're sat listening and you're thinking, I'm not very curious, and I find it very uncomfortable, using your words, Jace, to be vulnerable. Those are two things I just have a little bit of a think about. Is there a small little step you could do to help you kind of move forward?
It's leading me to realize, if this sounds hard, if you're a business owner, you're like, oh, I want that impact in my own company, but this sounds hard, it sounds confusing, it sounds scary, I don't know how to navigate it, hire someone. Could even be you, but there are people out here who we're really big on bring in an expert, bring in the team, don't try to figure it out on your own. There are people who have already figured it out that can help, that have resources, things like that, so it's not maybe quite as bumpy as it could be if you're just out there doing trial and error.
And Lucy, one question that we always ask at the end of every guest interview, and again, before I forget, thank you so much for being on the show. I definitely want to end with this answer. At the end of the day, how will you know if you lived a great life?
Such a great question to end with. And because I knew this question was coming, I can be a bit more succinct. You'll be pleased to hear. No, for me, it's two things. I think one, having no regrets.
Ooh.
And I'm a big believer in, make a decision, go for it, don't regret it. You won't know kind of what any other plan would have taught you. So just, go for things. If things come to you and you're a little bit scared, it's usually a sign to go for it. So no regrets. And the second thing is just that, I've hopefully had a positive impact in people's lives. I think that's something I try to continuously live by, whether it's just passing someone on the street, or, family and friends and people that I work with. So those are the things that at the end of the day, I hope show that I've had I can't remember what the exact phrase was, but that I've lived a good life.
Excellent answer.
Love that.
Lucy, thank you so much for being on the show. We're grateful for you being on Stories, Success, and Stuff. If people want to actually tune into your podcast, Impactful Authenticity, how do they find you? Where can they listen to you?
So pretty much any place that you normally get your podcast. So whether it be Spotify, Google, Apple, all of those lovely places, if you just search for Impactful Authenticity, it will be the only podcast, hopefully, that pops up for you. If not, you can listen to it via the website, so impactfulauthenticity.me, M-E. And you can find the podcast on there. You can listen to it via the website if you don't normally listen to podcasts. But I'm hoping if people are watching this show, they know where else to get.
And if you're looking for another great one, that it certainly is. And we'll include that info in the description below this episode as well. Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you.
Incredible episode.
Love her.
Love her interview. I also wanted to ask her, would you please read me lullabies? But I'm not going to ask her.
That'd be nice. But you could just fall asleep to her podcast and then let all of that great info hit the subconscious mind while you're sleeping.
Absorb.
Yes.
Yeah, and dream about Lucy and her.
And being, hey, that's what's authentic to you. It's going to be impactful. I'm going to tell you right now.
Absolutely. So thanks again for joining us for Stories, Success, and Stuff. I'm Kristelle. This is Jace. Looking forward to seeing some of you online on your favorite social media channel. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform, and obviously on YouTube and Siarza.com. This is Stories, Success, and Stuff.